Hey guys, so I just recently broke one of the hinges on one of my DW pedals again, and I thought maybe I didn't have any good help when I was trying to replace a hinge the first time, so I thought I'd make this little video just in case anyone out there is just broken a hinge themselves and they're looking for a resource. So what we're going to do is we're going to first identify how to know when the hinge is partially broken, figure out which hinge to get as a replacement, and of course, the fun part, actually replacing the hinge. So some of you might think that the hinge is broken once the footboard completely detaches from the base. But that's actually not the case. In order for this to completely detach, it has to break twice, or break in two different places. But of course, you don't want to wait for it to completely detach, right? You don't want to wait for it to break twice. So what we want to know is how to tell if it's broken once, how to tell if it's broken in a single spot. So you should be able to tell this, be able to tell whether or not it's broken in one spot based on just trying to wiggle the footboard back and forth, left to right. There should be absolutely no give. It should not be able to move back and forth at all. And if it does, that means it's broken. Now, where is it broken? Well, the part around which it's swiveling, that part is still fixed. It's the other piece, the other side of this. So in my case, it's the bottom right of the hinge. That's the part where it's broken. The hinge is actually attached in two places on the footboard up top and two places down below. So my bottom right spot, that's the broken one. The other thing you can do is just put your thumb on the part of the hinge and just try to move it like this. And you'll see if I do this piece, it's making a little bit of a clicking noise. That means it's broken off and it's hitting back and forth. Okay, so now that we've identified how to see if the hinge is broken in at least one spot, right? And we don't want to wait till it breaks again and completely detaches. We need to figure out what we're going to do for a replacement. So DW, depending on what pedal you get, they actually make two different hinges. We have one hinge right here. This is the hinge that I need for my pedals, right? So I got these DW 9000s. This needs what they call the Delta ball bearing hinge. According to the back of the package, it says that this is good for various 9000 series, 5000 series, and 7000 series pedals. Now, it used to be that the older 5000 series, which had the single chain, before they started coming up with the Delta 5000 pedals, did not use this. In fact, if you look at my hi-hat stand, you'll see that the hinge on that one looks different. So generally, what you would say is kind of like a color-coded sort of thing, right? If the pedal that you have has a red hinge, you need to get the red hinge replacement. If it's got the chrome hinge, then you need a chrome hinge replacement. The red one is presumably significantly better. It's got a ball bearing style hinge. It should be a lot smoother, right? You should have a lot less friction. You should be able to play faster with it. Unfortunately, it's also 3 times the price. So this was a little more than $40. It was like $42, $43 plus tax, of course. All right, so we're gonna go in the other room and we're gonna start to take this whole thing apart. Now, just a couple of notes before we get into that. In order to get to the hinge, you actually have to take a couple of things apart. So the first thing we're gonna actually do is we're going to detach this whole section here, right? Like the footboard to like the heel plate. We're gonna detach that from the bottom plate. Once we've done that, it'll expose the place where we can remove the hinge itself. There's actually 2 screws that are actually already exposed here and here to get to the hinge for the bottom piece, but you can't really get to the hinge, to the screws for the hinge on the footboard until you take this apart. So we're gonna start off by removing these 3 screws here, just to detach the whole bottom section, and then we're gonna take 4 more screws off to be able to get the hinge off. All right, guys, so we're over in my workbench area, which I obviously do not keep nearly clean enough. I got my pedal, and I've got the hinge, and a couple other things that we'll go over in a little bit. So first thing to do is obviously take the hinge out, get a pair of scissors, hopefully ones that are not broken like these, and just cut off the top. And cut open the side. And out comes the hinge. And also a little set of screws. Now, one thing to note on the screws, you'll see that the screws have a little bit of blue on them. We'll come back to what that is in a bit. Okay, so I got my hinge out. I'm going to just put this off to the side for now with those little screws that I got. As I mentioned before, our first job is to get these 3 screws off, right? Then I can get to the underside and I can get to all the screws for the hinge. So I'm going to lay this down. I got some old rags. I'm just going to throw one of the rags down right here for now and lay the pedal on top like this. And obviously, this is where things can start to get tricky. Now, in the past, I've noticed that the screws, when they come in, are extremely tough to get out. And you got to be careful. You do not want to strip these screws. You don't want to break the screw head off or anything. So one thing that you may want to do is you can first try to get these out and see if it comes out all on its own. Probably won't. You might want to spray in a little bit of WD-40 in there. We're going to just try and see how tight I put this last time. Hopefully it's not as tight as when it came from the factory. So I got this. I'm making sure the screw is nice and lined up, right? I want it to be straight. I want to apply pressure. Obviously, by the way, make sure the screw head and the screw size is matched up appropriately. If you have a longer screw, you'll be even better off because you'll get more torque. So apply some pressure and turn. And it looks like I did not put these in super tight. So if you needed to, you could try to put a little bit of WD-40 in there to try to loosen things up, like I said. One thing that I had to do last time is I actually had to use what's called an impact driver. If you find that these are not coming out, I can provide some info about an impact driver, but I'm sure you can find one of these at Home Depot or Lowe's. It's basically a specialized screwdriver that you put in, and you take like a ball peen hammer or something like this, and you basically actually hit the butt end, and it causes the screw to compress, the screwdriver to compress, and when it does that, it causes the head to turn, and it'll help get the screw out. Now you got to be very careful because I actually, on my other pedal, when I had broken the hinge on that, it actually caused the head to break off. So you have to be extremely careful with this. At that time, I had not tried the WD-40 trick. So I'm going to take these 3 screws off, and we're going to see how things look underneath. Okay, so I got all 3 screws out, as you can see. And I think it goes without saying that you do not want to lose these. So I'm got a little thing right off to the side over here. I'm just going to drop the screws in, and they are not going to be able to roll away. So now, as you can see, as I mentioned, the base was attached by these 3 screws, and voila, it's come off. Now, I also mentioned that this was broken in one spot, right? I said that this was broken in what was the bottom right at this spot here. And as you can see, as I flip it over, that's this part. So it's completely cut, completely broken off there. So obviously not good, right? That's why I was getting that clicking sound when I was rolling it before, right? I was making that sound. And that's why I was getting this motion, this give, because it was only holding on one side. And that's why if it breaks over here as well, if it breaks over here, it just completely separates on you. So what's the next thing we have to do? We have to take off all 4 of these screws, right? So we have these 2 here, which go to the footboard, and these 2 here, which go to the heel section. Now, it should be noted, remember before, we're going to get back to the thing with the screws that they gave us. These screws are replacement screws for these. So when we swap out the new hinge, we are going to replace the screws with the new ones with the fresh little blue, and we'll get to the blue afterwards. So let's see how tight these are, how tight I made these after I put them on. Again, This has been replaced once, so it's not at the factory strength right now. Okay, it looks like I left them loose enough, and I'm not going to have to go crazy with hunting down the impact driver that I had. Now, obviously, these screws are not as important as the other ones because we have the replacements, but still, I am going to put them in another little thing so they don't roll around. You'll notice that these have some blue on it too. Okay, so now I have this completely free. As you can see, right, the heel section, there's nothing holding it on now. It's completely off. And I got the old, terrible, broken hinge has come off as well. So I had my old red style hinge, or it's the Delta style hinge I have here. I got my new one not broken here. Obviously, it needs to go in the same way as before. So what does that mean? So the hinge part, right, the actual part that sticks out, that needs to, if you were looking at the orientation of your pedal normally, right, if your pedal was usually like this, right, and this is the face up part, the hinge part of it needs to be facing up. So now it's upside down. So it needs to go down, right? I need to put this into the footboard with it facing down. Now, which way, like this, does it go, right? Because it has to attach to the heel and to the footboard. Well, it needs to, remember, I took it off. It was like this. So this smaller section here, this goes up to the footboard. And this big section goes down to the heel. If you're not so sure, well, if you get a little confused, this does have a, I don't know if this is like a serial number or something that's written on this. Let me show you real quick. It's got a little number written on it, right? So for me to be able to actually read this, it needs to be right side up, right? So I'm going to attach this right side up just like this. And that's going to get secured with those two holes, against those two holes, and then here as well against those two holes. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to attach this to the heel, just so I have something that's a little bit bigger. I think it's going to be easier for me to work on. All right, finally we're going to get to these screws. So what is this blue? The blue is a little something called, I believe this is actually some version of Loctite. What is Loctite? Well, imagine if you had a piece of gear and it was going to be having to face vibration a lot, right? This could be because it's, on a keyboard rig, right? Or it's a PA speaker or something like this. You got screws in there. The vibration could cause the screws to basically come undone over time. Loctite is basically an adhesive that just gives it a little bit more grip. It helps keep it from moving so much. So when they ship these screws out, they put a little bit of Loctite on the threads, and I better not lose this, but they put a little bit of Loctite on the threads. And that's part of why I kept mentioning that you need to use the new screws, because you would technically have used up a little bit of the probably life of the Loctite on the old screws. So yes, definitely do use the new screws. Now, one other important thing to note, and let me get this hammer out of the way. When you're going through this, you will see that there are two different size screws. See? Let me put them right next to each other and zoom this in so you can see this. So yeah, this screw is bigger than this one. Let me turn it this way too. Maybe you guys can see a little bit better. So you can see they are not the same length. And if I go like this, you'll see that we actually have them in pairs. There's two really long ones and there's two short ones. So which screw goes where? Well, let's take a look back at our pedal again. So if you remember, we have the footboard, we got the hinge, right? And then we have where the heel goes. And the heel, these two screws, they line up with these two screws. Yeah, these two screw holes. You'll notice that you can see the screw holes here. It cuts all the way through on the heel, but not on the footboard. The footboard doesn't go through. And that should tell you exactly where the screws go. You have to apply the shorter screws here because they didn't cut the hole all the way through. The hole only goes part of the way through the footboard. And that's why there's no hole exposed on the other side, right? Because they didn't cut this hole down here all the way through. So the short screws go here on the footboard, and the long screws go here on the heel. So now that we know what we're doing, again, we're going to attach the new hinge with the hinge part facing down, and I can see the serial number or whatever that is facing up. I'm going to put this in here, and we're going to use the long screws again. We're going to put in these little guys. All right, so now it's starting to get pretty solid. I'm not going to want to go too crazy. I'm going to want to make sure it's nice and tight, but I don't want to go too crazy with it either because I don't want to have problems later on trying to get this off if this ever breaks on me again. What's left? Now we got to put this, we got to attach the other side of the hinge to the footboard. After that's done, we can come back and we can apply the base plate to it again, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. So we have left the two short screws. We want to not do one screw all the way back and forth between the two. Make sure it's nice and tight when you're done, but don't over tighten it. We don't want to be we don't want to be stripping the head. We don't want to be breaking the head off, and we don't want to be putting ourselves in a bad position later on if we have to take this off again. Okay, so now this is nice and tight. Again, we should make sure that there shouldn't be any wiggle. Like if I take the two pieces and I try to go like this, right, back and forth, rock it back and forth, there should be no give. If I try to take the two pieces and rotate them like this, again, there shouldn't be any give. And this should move freely. You shouldn't feel any resistance at all. Okay, so now we can go back to attaching the heel section back to the footboard. Now, again, there were 3 holes in here. We're going to line this up. One thing to note though, so again, I got the 3 screws. They're right over here. Now these screws, I don't remember if these had any Loctite on them when they got shipped. I'm looking right now, I don't see any blue. And obviously they didn't ship me anything to apply Loctite on this. But just to be safe, I am going to I actually have a tube of a liquid Loctite. Okay, so this is the stuff that I have, this brand of Loctite. I had just bought this at Home Depot some time ago. I've just used it on a few different things. As you can see, it's called a thread locker. It's blue, of course. And important thing, it is removable, right? We want to make sure this is something that's going to be able to come off. Basically what happens is that it holds it in place because it's an adhesive. And later on, to actually remove it, you just have to apply extra tension once until it basically breaks that adhesive. So when you first ever get this out and you open this thing up, sometimes you actually have to cut the top of the tube, right? The top piece is sealed and you have to snip it. And you want to snip it such that you get the smallest hole possible. When I cut mine, I made it just a little too big. So when you actually go to use this stuff, you need to put this on the thread of the screw and just a small dot, right? You don't want to put a ton on. What's going to happen? You're going to put that little bit of Loctite on the screw, and then you're going to screw it in. And what'll happen is that Loctite is going to get moved. It's going to get pushed around the whole side, and it's going to get moved all the way up, and then you'll have Loctite on the whole thing. So don't be trying to go and put Loctite on the whole thing yourself. It's going to be way too much. And when you screw it in, all the Loctite will start to come out of the hole, and you have to clean it up. If you accidentally make this hole too big, or you put too much on, just use a paper towel and you wipe it off. Now, what you're going to find is, as you're trying to get the Loctite on, you're trying to like get everything lined up, you're not going to have enough hands to do everything. So what I like to do is use 2 of the screws just to kind of brace everything together. All right, so I'm just going to temporarily put one in here, one in here, and that's it. I just did a couple little turns by hand, and this 3rd screw right here is the one I'm going to do for real. Now, I'm going to screw this in a good amount, but again, I'm not going to put it on all the way. As you can see, there's a little bit of give here, even with those 2 screws in. And I want to make sure everything is seated nice and evenly. And so that means that once I get all 3 with the Loctite in, most of the way, then I'll start to kind of rotate between the 3 until I get them all in. All right, so let's see how carefully I can get Loctite to go onto a screw. All right, so I don't know how well this is going to translate. I actually have already made a mess. I'm getting blue everywhere right now from my Loctite tube. Let me get, oh boy, yeah, I made a giant mess because I made this too big. All right, so what I just did right here is actually is pretty much how you want. You want a drop on one side, and you do not want to do what I did here and just spill Loctite everywhere. That is not good. All right, so I'm gonna put this in the screw like this, and in the hole, and I'm just gonna start to screw this in. Now we're gonna take out one of these other screws that I had put in temporarily. We're gonna do the same sort of thing. This is probably the best one that I did. It's closer to the bottom. I think it's the least amount that I've put on between all 3. So now I got all 3 in, a pretty decent amount. I'm going to just screw them in a little bit further until they are all almost flush. All right, now I'm just going to the point where I just have the smallest amount of resistance. So that's what I've just gotten to. Now I'm going to apply just a little bit more tension on each one. Now I'm going to come back around. I'm going to hold this and do a good amount of tension. Now at this point, I should be done, but I actually looks like I made a little bit of an error. So I'll share this with you guys just so you can avoid the same issue that I had. I forgot to make sure that this whole like sprocket area was aligned correct. And now I'm having difficulty getting the footboard down here. So I could probably shove it through if I really wanted to, but I don't really want to. So I'm just going to flip this over again, and we are going to unfortunately take these 3 back out. It's probably going to be a little bit of a mess because of the Loctite right now. Okay. And by the way, actually this is good. Might be a good little shot here. So it does look like some of the Loctite did spill out, especially on these 2, and this one it wasn't so bad. That's just because I put too much on it. I'm going to wipe that off. Now I'm going to make sure that I do this part up here correct, that I have this positioned correct. All right, so second time's a charm. Let me clean top of my Loctite again. So one thing to note, and I'm not sure how well you're going to be able to actually see this, but according to the Loctite, it says that the product sets in 20 minutes and then fully cures in 24 hours. So what does that mean? Well, it means that I am definitely not playing on these pedals tonight. I'm gonna let these sit. I'm gonna let the Loctite cure, and tomorrow I should be all good to go. So while I don't hope that you guys break any hinges on your pedals, I do hope that if you came to this video trying to find a solution to this problem, trying to figure out how to fix the pedals, that this was helpful to you, and that you're back up and running now and you're able to play again. I do have lots of other drum related videos coming out all the time, by the way. Covers and playthroughs and cymbal reviews, stick reviews, recording related stuff, you know, for those drummers who are recording at home. Lots of stuff. So if you don't want to miss out on that stuff, then don't forget to subscribe. And until next time, peace.